All right, here we are then, 1 week on from the Apple Vision Pro drop. We're going to talk about that kind of final thoughts. Roblox have made some big changes recently. Also going to talk about render token. What's that? We'll find out. Louis Vuitton as well. Fortnite, a new video for the new trailer for the next chapter. And Biden versus Trump, the debate, which is just ongoing as AI feeds it to us and you can watch it live. Interesting that Roblox have introduced a sort of scarcity model into digital assets on their platform, which is reminiscent of NFTs, but doing it in their own style and in their own way. So they have said that they, from today, are giving creators in their UGC program the ability to create limiteds, which isn't that catchy, but I think works, limiteds.
I mean, they could have come up with a better name, couldn't they? Restricteds, or I don't know. But yeah, limited editions, LE, I don't know.
Yeah. We don't work there clearly, but there we go. So yeah, it is interesting. So creators can now create a digital item, whether that's a fashion item or something else, and give a specified limited quantity of that. And there's some kind of metrics of how they get paid. So they can create it and they pay a small fee for limiteds, which is interesting. And it's Roblox's attempt to stop like a flooding of the market, because obviously AI is creating stuff at rapid pace as well. People are using that, so you do have to pay a little fee up front to kind of create one of these series. You get some of that back when it sells. It's a little bit complicated, but these things can be resold, much like NFTs, and there is a 10% creator kind of royalty from ongoing sales from that. The structure, if you are a creator and you make something and it's limited and you want to sell it, the creator of the item gets 30% of whatever it's sold for. This I don't quite understand. The seller or distributor of the item gets 40%. I assume that was the seller as well, but no. And the platform gets 30%. So that's the big difference between obviously NFTs here and in Roblox as scarcity, is that Roblox are taking a big chunk. Plus this all only lives inside Roblox. So a lot of information, but what are your thoughts here, Robin?
Well, it's clearly a model that they've learned from the NFT market. The most interesting part of this is obviously the royalty. A 10% original creator payout every time the item is resold. And because it's a closed ecosystem, they can enforce it in a way that, you know, in the NFT space, royalties have become a little bit tricky to enforce because they're not actually enforceable on chain at the moment. And so you have to rely on the marketplace itself to enforce the royalty, which means that marketplaces, in a bid to attract new users and to, well, it's basically a race to the bottom, they get around the royalties, which means it's cheaper for traders, who are the main consumers of NFTs, to buy and sell these things, trading a narrative or trading a piece of speculation rather than desiring to hold the item itself. This, because it's Roblox and because people trade items on Roblox because they actually do want them and they have some form of utility for them, whether it's just to look nice or to gain superpowers within the game, that's super interesting. What will be interesting to see is the velocity of items. So that's how much they change hands in a game. What I think will be also interesting here is how much game design will change or transform in order to promote greater velocity. Because it's also, you know, every time an item gets sold, you get 10%. There is an incentive for a game designer to make it appealing or attractive or necessary for an item to change hands regularly, because then of course you get paid every time it does so. So that could change some dynamics there. And if this 10%, you know, over time it could end up being quite a lot. You were asking about the creator of the item getting 30%. Well, that's obviously what I think that reflects is if I'm a game publisher and I hire someone to make an item or a specific item, or it could be a special edition, or it could be an artist that you bring in to make that specific item, then they get a reflection on that. But again, if you are the creator and the vendor of the item, you will get, you know, a big chunk of it. Roblox taking 30%, that's pretty standard for anyone building on Roblox. But the tricky thing here, and again, I watch how my kids interact with Roblox. The tricky thing here is over financializing, or basically creating heavy market pressure or heavy market dynamics on games that are skewed towards a younger audience. What psychological pressures that heaps on those that publish and make the games. That for me feels where there's some slightly tricky ground to cover. I don't know what you think.
it was starting to introduce kind of mini market dynamics into games at quite a young age. But it's also clever because I could never see a future, and I think we've mentioned it before, where, you know, Roblox integrates NFTs that are sold on an open market with, you know, that a market which is volatile based on what the federal government, you know, decides and all the financials of the, like, that just doesn't make sense. I can't imagine a, you know, 8 to 13-year-old being fine or it being okay in general to have any sort of link to actual financial markets. So it's like kept within Roblox as an economy. And then it does ask bigger questions, because we've just seen like the EA and the Nike.swoosh announcement where NFTs essentially are going to be in EA Games titles. But then can they live in their own ecosystem, and do they need to be connected to an open market at all as well? So, and it sort of throws up a lot of questions, because this model, I think, makes most sense for this age group 100%, and it's even weird then because there's some market dynamics. So yeah, it's strange, isn't it?
I listened to my daughter talking about her trading activity and how she...
What does she say about that? Because that
trades.
Is fascinating for a lot of people, especially if you don't have kids, like their knowledge, where they're at with stuff. And
it's incredible because it's this daily check-in with her digital self and her digital identity. And she plays Royal High. So every day she goes and she gets diamonds. She can trade those diamonds for rare items and craft a look that she wants, because there are fashion shows within Royal High, and you do these parades and you show off your outfit and then people vote on it, and there's all this social proof, there's all this social signaling that goes on in there. She's 11 years old, but she's getting real sneaky with the way she trades things. And actually, funny enough, in the last couple of days, her account has been hacked.
Oh no.
And she's seen someone playing games that she didn't play. She saw someone changing her username, and now she cannot access her account because whoever was hacking it has changed the password. And I don't really know what protections are in place for this, but she's absolutely gutted because she's invested so much mental energy into building this version of herself and building this profile of herself that now it's no longer there. Fortunately, you can view the personal history of the old version of herself or the old account, so she can see what she bought. And so she now can very rapidly get back there. But there was some significant value that she'd accrued through her activities, which are now... but have been stolen.
Yeah, that's awful, isn't it?
It's brutal. There's some sort of heavy life lessons. And I'm also aware of her mobile phone usage and her exposure to WhatsApp groups and the nasty things that go on between kids in these groups. And that's the stuff that we know about, but I don't know what interaction she's having in Roblox in the text chat. There's a lot of things to consider, and there is a genuine need to monitor this stuff and make sure that kids at that age are not getting exposed to the wrong kinds of pressures. But so this is quite a bold move,
isn't it? And the
anyway.
limited thing, scarcity in general is very tied to value. Like if these items are rare, then all of this stuff is going to go up a gear because there'll be some stuff that will be very valuable. So it adds another layer for kids at that age.
Yeah, people love to dunk on NFTs because scarcity is just a way to push the price of something up. And no, not really. Scarcity rewards those who really care about something. And it gets co-opted into this narrative around greed and just, scarce for the sake of scarceness. But in some instances, sometimes something is scarce because it's meant to be scarce. It has more value inherently, extrinsically or intrinsically, for the people that care about it. And as long as it's not extractive or just for the sake of itself, then it's not a bad thing. When you get a limited edition chocolate bar that's like this chocolate bar that you love, but they do a limited version of it, that has some value because it's novelty, it's a kind of refresher, a scene change. I don't know. I think the whole scarcity thing gets a really bad rap because of the Bored Apes. But actually, if you kind of take a step back, it can be meaningful if you are in dialogue with your community or in dialogue with the people that consume your game, and you offer them something that for them has value.
And nobody complains about scarcity in the physical world, so it doesn't seem like a...
They really don't, do they?
All right. That's interesting. We'll see how that develops with Roblox. Next, we're going to chat about Mark Zuckerberg's reaction to the Apple Vision Pro, which is interesting. But this is what he said. This is an article from The Verge. he had a company-wide meeting and said that Apple's device didn't present any major breakthroughs in technology that Meta hadn't already explored, and that its vision for how people will use the device is not the one that I want. He mentioned the price tag of the Meta Quest 3 coming being $499 versus $3,499 of the Apple Vision Pro. He said that the Quest is always about people interacting in new ways and feeling closer, whilst also being active and doing things. By contrast, I thought this was a good point. Every demo that Apple showed was a person sitting on a couch by themselves. So they're going after different audiences, different use cases, at the minute at least. I mean, it's the Apple Vision Pro, so what's the next one going to be? That maybe is going to rattle their feathers more. And obviously, he wasn't going to say, yeah, it's brilliant, we're all screwed. So, funny, kind of.
Yeah, but the demos weren't all a person sitting on a couch by themselves, although there was a lot of that. This is absolutely correct. It was a lot of isolated me time stuff. The ones that weren't was like this really awkward encounter between a woman and presumably her partner, and she's got the headset on, and you just think, are you going to kill me? I mean, it's so freaky. And then the other one was the dad taking 3D photos of his kids, and there was a hilarious meme that went around. It was like, why is this guy watching 3D photos of his kids? Because they left him after he spent $3,500 on a headset. I mean, but it does absolutely bring it home that there's, for all that Apple wowed us with some genuinely innovative technology, they will struggle with the same things that Meta has been struggling with. And like this message from Mark Zuckerberg is just like, here's a kind of, I'm a bothered.
Yeah, I'm a bothered.
Yeah, I'm a bothered. Yeah, we did that like 10 years ago. We didn't like it. Because we want to lose money on every headset.
That's
so
exactly
what
it sounds like as well.
There's no doubt that like they've spent a lot of money on this, and of course they have explored tons of things. Like what Apple have done is they've used the collective might of their ecosystem to just brute force this thing into existence. And I think what's very interesting, particularly in terms of that 2-hour presentation, is all the things they didn't say. I've done an entire video about this because it was fascinating to me. Like, for all that they said, there were a bunch of things that were left out, and we sort of covered some of these on the stream that we did with Artur. But if you haven't seen that video, do check it out, because there were some specific things they didn't mention. Not once did they say the word AI. Not once did they say VR. And not once did they say Metaverse. Those 3 terms, which have obviously been in the zeitgeist, which have been co-opted by other companies, not once did they mention them. They did, of course, talk about AR, and the big one was spatial computing. That's something we've been talking about internally here at Base. Like, that's a narrative that we want to be exploring, because spatial computing, this it's just like, you've got a very tiny wiener. Yes.
Moving
it. No, I'm just operating my Vision Pro. I've just what are you saying? That the way that we interface with the world, the phasing out of the smartphone into a new form of computing, that stuff is really interesting.
Can I ask one question about this? Because I do think Meta have, at first when that trailer dropped and the keynote and everything, I was like, holy moly, this is a huge moment, and it is, and it's amazing, and that headset is great. And then as it sort of settled a bit, and I went and looked at the Meta Quest 3 as well, the biggest thing that stood out to me was the kind of social element and the gaming side of it, right? And I feel like Apple have to get more into the gaming world if they're going to stand a chance of people really buying sort of multiple of these devices and playing with each other, and that kind of jealousy of like, oh, that, my mate's playing that or whatever. And then they did announce something where they
do they?
Well, I think that's the best.
But what do you use your phone for?
Yeah, standard everyday stuff.
Do you play games on it?
Not really. Yeah, I guess so. I think it's the Vision Pro.
They do have Apple Arcade. They do have Apple Arcade, and they've been,
it's a bit rubbish though, Apple Arcade.
It is rubbish.
But they have announced something at WWDC where I can't remember the exact technical term, but it's making it way easier to port Windows games over to run on Macs as well.
Yes, and there was I saw a demo of someone using WebXR on Safari, which I think makes total sense. If you can view WebXR experiences on the Vision Pro, that will be dope. Like, we've been playing around with mixed web and WebXR experiences with our own game show format. It's coming soon to BasedAF, which you'll be the host of as well. And it actually is great. So you have the host in VR, and anyone else can join in VR and sit down and watch the show, but you can also join via a web browser. That ability to mix both those environments at the same time, shout out to Spatial, amazing. That is actually very cool. That's sort of getting towards this idea of multi-platform interoperability that I think is really the key to the future of all of this. I was going to say something else, but I've completely forgotten what it was.
We'll move on in a second, but that is a good point. I think, yes, as long as we can all participate in some form, whether that is via your phone to join. And
I remember what it was. The biggest thing that they didn't talk about at the event was Unreal Engine. Didn't mention it one bit. Like, we're talking about the platform upon which you build spatial computing. Obviously, it's going to be a game engine. Obviously, it's going to be 3D capable and very, very good at that. It wasn't Unreal Engine that they partnered with. It was Unity. And if you're talking about Unity, you're talking about the platform for just a gazillion different games and experiences that can now be moved onto the Vision Pro. So, again, this is spatial. This is on the cyber. This is Monaverse. This is VR chat. Anything built on Unity can and should be very easy to move to the Vision Pro. What that means exactly, I'm not sure, but I know the stock price went up a lot, and a lot of people that I know that were kind of had hung their hat on Unity, despite all the advances that Unreal was making, suddenly felt like they were massively vindicated, and I can understand why.
We've got a bit of a battle on, which is good. All of this stuff is shaping up head to head, which makes it way more interesting for sure. So, that is very, very cool.
Just one last thing, though. You were saying that reassessing the Quest and its place within this whole ecosystem. I think you're absolutely right. As an entry level, like, first step into VR and those kind of gaming experiences, I still think the Quest is just fun as hell. It's not the cheapest, cheap, but it is probably the cheapest way you can get those kind of thrills. And I just don't know if the Quest 3 is really that much of an advance on it.
I had a look at it in the last episode as well, and it's a bit more of what we've already got, isn't it? It's certainly not groundbreaking in the way that.
But we'll probably just end up buying them all anyway, because that's what we do, and then we'll test them, and then they'll sit on a shelf, and we'll never use them again. I mean, we're the very definition of early adopters, and that's the early adopters journey.
And it's a bit chicken and egg.
Exactly.
It gets most fun. Obviously, it's the kind of network effect thing where more people are on it. There's more to do. More people are developing. It gets way more fun, and then it's off. So it's like we're in that getting everything off the ground, beginning of the curve type thing, aren't we? So
there is so many problems to solve as well, just in terms of just networking. I mean, that's probably the biggest one of all, like getting enough people in the same space at the same time with the highest level of graphic fidelity, and it doesn't crash. Good luck.
Yeah, still work to do for sure. All right, kind of on this point, I mean, we've now what the Vision Pro did definitely do. If you didn't kind of believe in this future already, in terms of kind of spatial computing and VR and AR, mixed reality and all this stuff, because it's very fragmented at the minute, but it did put a stamp going, this is the future in some form, whatever that looks like. And obviously we've had all the AI massive boom, which continues to move. And so the back end of all of this is that one of the biggest digital commodities of the future is going to be computer power to render and power everything, this whole new world. So there's kind of an interesting story developing here where, obviously NVIDIA are a big part of this, but we're starting to see that every tech company is building these tools into their sort of workflow and their future. So there's a massive demand for this compute power. Twitter recently bought 10,000 GPUs to kickstart their kind of AI projects, and we're starting to see a shortage of that stuff. So there's reports that Microsoft, AWS, Amazon Web Services, and Google have been limiting their GPU availability to customers because of this demand. Before we get into what, may be a part of the solution here, maybe you could just explain what all this means. What happens when we are rendering something in the cloud, or we're using Midjourney or whatever? Kind of, maybe you could talk through that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the cloud has kind of disappeared as one of those kind of giant narratives, because I think there's a move to bring compute back locally in certain cases, like edge computing. And I know certainly with iPhones and with the Vision Pro itself, trying to bring more of the compute back into the device itself, that's part of it. But if you're thinking about all of the rendering demands of a fully fleshed out 3D metaverse, plus all the all the compute power required to power, all the different AI tools that are out there that are clearly going to, be the backbone of productivity in the next decades and coming years. There's a big shortage of this stuff. But what obviously isn't so well known is that, a lot of computing, particularly if you're an animation company or you're doing visual effects, you don't render this stuff locally. You send it off to a render farm, and then you can send it off to the cloud. So this company, Otoy, that makes the Octane render, they build a system for doing cloud rendering, and that is allowing anyone with their own idle GPU to add that GPU compute power to the cloud and become a service provider to the network, and in exchange for the render token to provide their compute power to the cloud, and then anyone that wants to take advantage of that can do so for a pretty cost-effective price. What you're seeing is that the render token itself is on the up and up, in contrast to the broader crypto market, because the render token is a crypto token, but it's a means by which you can buy and sell services on the GPU network of the render token. But it's clear that there's going to be increased demand for GPU capacity, and it's not about necessarily rendering. It's the AI requirements as well. People running local versions of LLMs. Like, there's just a whole bunch of GPU power that's required, and a massive shortage of it as these things, become more and more embedded into society.
In its simplest form, correct me if I'm wrong of how this is working, but like, say you are using Midjourney, you're essentially putting in your prompt, and then it is being the power is happening in a server farm somewhere miles away, where there is loads of computers and GPU chips and stuff. It's happening in the cloud, and it's sending you back the final image. But that is that there's so much demand that there's less space of that. So what this token is doing, render, and this network is anyone who's got spare computer power, means that they can kind of rent it out, right, for anybody to use, and then there's a token dynamic there, so you get paid if you do that. That's what's happening here, right?
Yeah, it's basically, so NVIDIA make GPUs, but they make specific types of GPUs for specific types of problems. So the 4090, which is the beast gaming PC kind of graphics card, also is very capable at rendering video and rendering visual effects, rendering under an engine, all these kind of things. That's what we use it for. But those same cards, it turned out, were really good at mining cryptocurrency as well. They're just very, very, very powerful cards, and it turns out they're also very good at processing AI requests and data and powering those LLMs as well. So we heard that Elon Musk had bought like 10,000 of NVIDIA's top end chip when they cost about 10 grand. And like, there's only so much of this stuff that you can make. And as we know, what really makes all of this tick is the semiconductors, which are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And TSMC, the Taiwanese company that makes the very smallest of the smallest, is in this incredibly rarefied position, sitting on the island of Taiwan with all its geopolitical sensitivities, creating the most important single resource for the world's computing infrastructure.
How mad that's all kind of changing in real time, and all of these geopolitical things are all connected kind of in a way, and this is the future that's coming. Like, it's interesting, isn't it? You can sort of see this stuff playing out in real time. It's interesting.
Yeah, and in the Netherlands, you have another company that is it writes the patterns onto silicon chips. It's called ASML. And if you live in Holland, there's this sort of unsaid thing, which is like, no one's going to ever invade Holland because of this one company. Like, this company is too important for anyone to ever mess with Holland.
Interesting.
It's completely mad that if you're talking about biodiversity, you have these monoclonal plants. Rubber is one of these such plants. So it basically means that if one rubber plant gets sick, it will spread to the entire population of rubber plants at such a speed that it will simply wipe it out. There's no real diversity in rubber plants. And if you think about how important rubber is to pretty much everything, any impact to rubber tree colonies would be devastating for industry. And so you desperately do absolutely everything you can to decentralize situations. So you don't want all your data in a single silo, but we have this massive centralization problem when it comes to semiconductors and the ability to write patterns on silicon in these two incredibly powerful, incredibly important companies. And of course, the US is weaponizing the export markets to basically set China back. They estimate it's around about 10 years that China is back in terms of their own ability to create semiconductors. The whole situation is insane. And basically the US is just weaponizing the supply chain by not allowing China access to the materials that they need that are so specialized that are made in the US that they can't get access to them. So they can't actually catch up to the US in terms of their ability to create chips and build their own industry around all of that.
Yeah,
it's mad.
It is interesting.
It's completely mad.
Do your own research on render token, obviously.
Gosh, we've gone deep. I wasn't expecting to go so deep, but I find this stuff fascinating because, I think there's this all this interconnectedness around what we think of as the metaverse. It kind of builds from games into infrastructure, into the very fabric of computing technology itself. And to really kind of understand the metaverse, you need to understand all of this stuff and how it all connects and what the threats to it are. And, things like Web3 and cryptocurrency, they play a part, as does geopolitics. It's all connected and it's all happening in front of us in real time at such a speed. It's
wild time to live through it, isn't it? There's probably a good video in connecting all these dots together, isn't there, as well? That's
I think there is. Well, we've got a video coming up about NVIDIA, which is, and Jensen Huang, who's very interesting. I think some people are kind of starting to see him as the next Steve Jobs-like figure in tech. It's very, very interesting. So you obviously got Elon, you got Bezos. Bezos sort of stepped back, obviously, but Jensen Huang and his position now and what he's managed to accomplish, just in terms of this sort of mildly maverick tech visionary, I think he's starting to get to that place that Elon occupies in terms of people's consciousness and awareness. Plus, he's just very personable, he's very charismatic. He always wears a leather jacket. He's got that kind of cult thing about him, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Really interesting time.
For sure, it's probably a good shout. All right, let's jump on to the next story because we are going to sort of take the temperature on NFTs and where everything is at the moment, and also just notice the shift in kind of the nuance of how companies and people are working in the Web3 space and releasing stuff. So the story is around Louis Vuitton, who are launching a new collection of treasure trunks NFTs costing 39,000 euros each. So they are absolutely just going for the full luxury end.
Overpriced.
I mean,
yes.
No doubt, just luxury in general, overpriced. But essentially...
They're not swimming trunks either. They're digital trunks. I read that and I'm like, oh yeah, take those down to the Brighton beach. And no, it's not. It's
like a treasure chest.
Oh, it's like sometimes you're just look at yourself. Yeah. Just for one tiny second, look at what you're doing here. I mean, firstly, Louis Vuitton. It's a brand I have a difficult relationship with because it's like, it's luxury bags, but then there are so many knockoffs of these things. It's like you go on holiday and you get your knockoff Louis Vuitton bag that looks very credible and like the original, and it's just like I personally find them pretty ugly, but that's my personal taste. This trunk is just, it looks like an old record box, like when DJs had vinyl. Remember that, kids? Before we got MP3s and streaming and all this stuff, there was like physical vinyl and DJs used to carry around a record. It looks like that. It's kind of metal. And then, so you've got this NFT and you have this wonderful word phygital. So you've got a physical and a digital. Phygital.
Yeah. And they're...
Sounds like a disease, doesn't it? Oh, you've got a bad case of phygital. You've got a bad case of phygital there, son. We've got to recommend a cream for that. But the narrative around this is that it's obviously a luxury brand. Luxury brands have traditionally not been very good at digital because, for obvious reasons, luxury brands are about craftsmanship. They're about heritage. They're about this feeling of superior everything that is tactile that you can experience, and digital doesn't really deliver that. But of course, digital now can deliver that through scarcity, like we were talking before. So scarcity is a luxury component now. You can't have it, but I can because I can afford it. I mean, if you have a nice Rolex, you put it on your wrist and you flex it, and people go, "Ooh, nice Rolex, mate." You go, "Yeah, it is." In it. And then there's like this whole secondary market for Rolexes, and wonderful. This thing, come on.
You've got to carry your treasure chest around with you.
Yeah, but you're not going to use this for anything. Like, if you have kids, they'll be sitting on it. And like, it's just like, come on. Like, we can do better than this, surely.
Yeah, I mean, their thing is that it's going to be, the starts of this physical treasure chest and the NFT version, and then exclusive products and experiences come to the person who holds it. You also can't sell the original NFT. It's soul bound, which is interesting. So this is a thing that, if you've got the physical treasure chest, you can prove you've got the NFT, so you definitely own it. It is real that,
Do you want to explain soul
good
bound?
Shout. Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, with, the NFTs that you've all heard about before, if you buy one, you can sell it and trade it multiple times, and, that fuels the whole market. A soul bound token is a different type of NFT. That means once it's in your wallet, it can never leave, so there isn't a sort of secondary marketplace for it, but it can prove that you've got something real, or people will talk about it for maybe they'll be useful for things like degrees in the future. So you can go to your wallet and see all the jobs you've been to, and they're things that locked to your wallet that only you have and never leave. So this is interesting. So you're going to have the chest, and then they're going to roll out different products and experiences as we go forward, which makes sense. It's in contrast to what they did. They did a previous NFT free-to-play game thing. They've obviously gone, do you know what, screw that. That's not Louis Vuitton making it accessible to everyone. Let's go super high-end, and it's going to be, for people who can afford this type of thing, which is kind of wild. It's going to give you keys that unlock additional products, and then the additional products that come to you can be sold. So it's kind of like this sort of master key to getting stuff, and then you can trade what arrives to you after that.
The soulbound concept is sometimes a little bit tricky for people to understand. It comes from a video game, and it was coined by Vitalik, although he didn't actually come up with the concept. But the idea is that the asset belongs to you and is tied in some way to you in a way that you cannot ever break. And so if you think about your passport, that is a soulbound token, effectively, because it cannot belong to anybody else. And what it does is it creates a zero secondary market for the item. So once you're in, and it's then about the relationship with you over time as a result of ownership of this token. So the token itself isn't valuable. It's what it unlocks for you that is valuable, which is quite an interesting dynamic. And you can think about it in terms of membership. If you're put forward as a member of, for instance, Soho House, that membership could be a soulbound token. And one of the perks of that would be allowing you to put other people forward for membership, those kind of things, but it can never be transferred. That's actually pretty powerful. We're still trying to get to the kind of idea of how best to use those. But I think what's interesting here is Louis Vuitton's strategy, which they're calling Web 2.5, includes more traditional methods like email correspondence. Why is that Web 2.5? I don't know. I don't really like the idea of Web 2.5. It's like, it's not quite Web 3, it's not quite Web 2. It's like, you're either using blockchain or you're not. If you are, then you are Web 3. You can't kind of backtrack and sort of go around the outside. It's like, just own that.
I guess it's the user experience of Web 2, but the ownership of Web 3, right? So instead of getting people to...
But like every user experience of Web 3 involves some form of like connection to communication channels. Nobody's fully pseudonymous. It doesn't exist. So, I don't know. And that's also assuming that Web 3 can have nothing to do with Web 2. Like, it's all mixed up and commingled, and there are certain shades of things which make sense. Anyway, I don't want to rant about NFTs because it gets boring for people, but the soulbound part of this I thought was interesting. But the price, the product itself, not for me.
For me, no. That is absolutely fair enough. All right, rattling through, we've also seen Fortnite Chapter 4 Season 3 trailer, which launches today, which we were saying, I love these trailers. They make you feel like a kid again of what's happening, and they sort of arrive in this camouflage jungle thing, and then a transformer appears, which on paper makes no sense, and if that was a pitch for the next sort of season, then I'd be like, what the hell's going on? But obviously, they're amazing at bringing in all different IPs, and it just gets you excited.
Well, I think what's the headline about Fortnite is this game is 6 years old now. 2017 it launched, and they were actually thinking about it back in 2014. You forget kind of the shelf life that games can have, and Fortnite builds on the games as a service model that Epic adopted back in 2012. And it's the ability of this game to just continue delivering fresh and original experiences in the very narrow context of the Battle Royale format. So now we've got all these new powers and environments to check out. So there's this new jungle biome. You can ride raptors in there. There's a thermal DMR. There's a flapjack rifle. There's a Cybertron cannon. You can indeed unlock Optimus Prime. And there's all sorts of new mechanics in there. Fundamentally, the gameplay itself never really changes. You go in there and you shoot people and you try and survive as long as possible. But it's endlessly fun to play because every time you play, it's different. It's a genius model. And of course, we are fascinated with Fortnite because it's not just a game that you play. It's also a platform for others to build experiences on there as well. There were some statistics that came out. I think we should probably share them on screen at this point as well, that showed the breakdown of the first batch of creator payouts under the new model of UEFN. What was really interesting was that you saw, like, most creators are getting bugger all because there's no engagement on the platform, but there were just a handful who are seeing some serious money, like proper serious money, like six figures, and like there's cash there. What we're now seeing is big Fortnite creators, so people who play Fortnite and stream it on Twitch, have put together crack teams to launch their own experiences on Fortnite. What this means is that those kind of previously incumbent creators who were on the platform, who were making kind of fun little games, are probably going to get squeezed to the margins because the guys that are coming in now are like the £20 gorilla in the room, £120 gorilla, £400 gorilla. What is it?
I don't know, but like average
they come in swinging a huge amount of distribution, a huge user fan base that they can bring to their games or whatever they want to deliver, who will play them, get the engagement, get the XP, and get this massively increased chunk of revenue. And of course, what I think Fortnite themselves, what Epic wants to see is, does that engagement connect to increased market activity or buying of skins? Like, the more people are engaged and the more they're playing this game, will they buy more stuff? Because if they buy more stuff, then Epic's revenue goes up and they can share more with creators. There's no direct link between the two. What I'm expecting and I'm hoping to see is that the marketplace on Fortnite will open up to include the Fab marketplace, which is their massive, all things for all people 3D marketplace. If they will open up that marketplace to creators to sell their own skins, to sell their own unique items in game, then it explodes. It's at that point that it explodes, because then suddenly, if we're thinking about that Roblox model, if you can do limited editions, Epic's taking 30% plus, a cut of every time this thing gets sold. That's a huge revenue unlock for Epic, but it needs to be done extremely carefully, and you need to have a very, very good creator tool, particularly for skins, so that they actually work seamlessly within the engine itself. But you can guarantee they're working on it.
Yeah, no doubt. That makes a lot of sense of their thought process, doesn't it? But yeah, interesting for sure. All right, the last thing that we wanted to show is just absolutely wild. Now, there's always been, more recently, the kind of fear of, deepfakes and elections of people saying stuff, and yeah, those things are scrutinized very heavily, and we've not really seen one that could look really realistic. But this is a Twitch stream that's ongoing between Trump and Biden that looks really good, and they're just arguing with each other, and it's mental.
It speaks for itself. It's very not suitable for work as well. But what I love about this is, like, it's just happening in real time. It's kind of wish fulfillment, isn't it? It's like the debate you want to see, because Biden refuses to debate anybody. They're so scared, I think, that he's cognitively impaired that they're not letting him into any public engagements, because he's just so ripe for attack. Whereas Trump, we know he's not afraid of a town hall. He'll go into any news debate and just lay it down. He's not scared at all. But this is the debate you want to see, and they're just slagging each other off. And what's so awesome about it is that they're looking at the comments on the stream itself, pulling those into the AI, and then just spitting out comments and insults, and it's just this is welcome to 2023.
Yeah,
everyone.
It's absolutely mental.
It's amazing. It's very entertaining.
I'll link it, obviously, but yeah, like you say, it does speak for itself. And one thing AI can't do is make Joe Biden fall over. I don't think. I've not seen that in the debate so far. So there we are. We know it's not real.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. Yeah, it will definitely happen. Good stuff. Well, plenty there, and lining up for another good week in the metaverse and beyond, really.
Yeah, I'm just going to plug what's going on the channel. So we've just released a film, obviously looking at the Vision Pro, which was really interesting. You released a pod just looking at the headset environment, like what can you buy, what should you buy, what's interesting, because the Vision Pro, as sexy and exciting as it is, you're not going to be able to get it until next year, and you probably won't want to fork out $3,500 for it anyway. So it's probably going to be like 2 years before we see like Quest 3 like device from Apple that's at a reasonable price point. So what else could you do to get a step up in VR? And then our big film next week is going to be about NVIDIA, but we're really kind of ramping up our exploration into these big tech companies, the infrastructure side of things, because it's super fascinating. And then at the end of the month, we will be doing our very first UEFN build release. We've built something special. You've actually had a little play around with it as well, so you've seen it.
Yeah, it was really, really fun, and it's a very cool concept. So yeah, excited to see that go out.
Because I think, as fun as it is for us to chat about all of this stuff, because we're sort of in it, it's so much more fun when we build our own experiences. And like we're building them on different platforms, Web3 or non-Web3, Unity, Unreal, but like we're builders as much as we are commentators, and I think that's super important at this stage, because otherwise I just don't think you can possibly know how any of this stuff really works.
Yeah, you could talk about it forever, but you got to get amongst it for sure.
That's right.
Good stuff. All right, well that's probably the pod, I reckon.
I think that was the pod. I'll see you on the other side.
Peace.
Bye.